Hello everybody, it's Zach. And I just felt like I had to get this out of the way. I felt kind of obligated to return back on talking about the debate that I had with GabeisGunk yesterday. As there were some subjects I left kind of open and said that I would return back to, as far as reading back on some of them. So if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it. And if you have seen it, go ahead and tell me down in the comment section down below of how you think that I did. Ultimately, I thought it was a good debate. It was a pretty good, sharp debate. He really rather challenged me. It was a good debate, aside from the one part of where that he was getting kind of obnoxious about the Gallup poll that I had cited to him, acting like that he had got me in a gotcha, when really, no, not really, no, because I've already seen that third chart that he was pointing out to. I just did not freshly remember exactly what it said, but the biggest category of the percentages shown in the third chart, 50% legal only under certain circumstances. I pretty much thought from the beginning when I first laid eyes on that chart that was kind of a jaded topic right there. That was a jaded category, a jaded category, because that category could almost cover pro-choicers who believe in some exceptions on their stereotypical beliefs, and some pro-lifers who believe in exceptions on their stereotypical beliefs. And also looking at the fourth chart that was provided in this Gallup poll, it goes showing even further, 35% legal in only a few circumstances, along with 20% illegal in all circumstances, versus the more pro-choice leaning people who say legal under any circumstances and legal in most circumstances, which kind of almost implies to me that nowadays anyways, it seems that most of the United States seems to be generally pro-life, even legally speaking, but I digress. That's neither here nor there. Aside from the whole part of when that we were having a bit of a shouting fest over the Gallup poll, it was a good debate, and I thought that I did fairly well, aside from the violinist part, when he brought in the violinist argument, which I did not have quite the specified argument that I should have. I did not have the full way to articulate it. I mean, I've heard the arguments before against the violinist argument. I just never really memorized them word for word on exactly how they are said. Like both Bass F double Z, which I'll link his video down in the description box below. Go ahead and check out his video, and also my 2 cents video when he goes addressing the issue of bodily autonomy and the violinist argument when it comes to the issue of abortion. So go check out both of those videos, and actually I'm going to first play out my 2 cents, a little bit of his video on this.
Let's start with Thompson's violinist scenario. I agree with Thompson that self-ownership means that a person's property may not be used by a different person without the owner's consent, and that would include their body as well. For example, suppose I receive a phone call from a hospital letting me know that if I donate one of my kidneys to a dying man with whom I have no personal ties, he will be able to survive an otherwise fatal condition. It would be very nice of me if I were to agree to this, but it seems obvious that I am not under any sort of obligation to give up my kidney. If and when the person dies, he will die as a result of his physical condition, even if it were the case that giving up my kidney would have saved him. However, while I may be justified in not giving the man my kidney, I would not be justified in marching into the hospital, cutting off all of the man's limbs, and then burning him to death. There may be circumstances where it is permissible to allow a person to die without attempting to save him, but such circumstances do not, therefore, give you the right to actively kill that person through violent means, even if he will die anyways. This would be a blatant violation of the non-aggression principle. This is the first major problem with Thompson's argument. In the scenario she presents, you are only justified in detaching yourself from the violinist, the result being that he dies of a physical condition he had anyways. However, abortion is not merely withholding voluntary support, such as refusing to donate a kidney or detaching yourself from a machine. It is actively killing a living human being by poisoning or cutting up their body and then vacuuming the dismembered parts out of the womb.
Go ahead and watch the full video, because I did not provide the full context and every single last one of his fully fleshed out arguments from that video. There's a whole lot more that he provides in responding to that. But I guess one thing that I could have and should have at least said in response to the violinist argument. Actually, let me lay out what the violinist argument is in the first place. Basically, you have a person who was kidnapped and was forcefully provided to do a blood transfusion or whatever the exact surgery or terminology is in order to save a violinist who is like suffering from kidney failure. And by extension of the pro-lifers' argument that a person's bodily autonomy does not trounce another person's right to life just because they ended up inadvertently, connected and physically relying on that other person at no fault of their own. And saying that essentially if somebody was to come in and save that second person from being forcefully used as a blood transfusion, as a blood bag for the violinist, that would be considered immoral by the pro-lifer stance. And I guess what I could have at least said in response to that is that in the case of disconnecting from the violinist, that it's not direct active killing. It's not a direct act of killing. It's more like withdrawing support, more specifically, which is why that it would not exactly be equivalent to pregnancy. Whereas in the case of aborting a fetus, in the case of a pregnancy, as laid out by my 2 cents there, is that there's like a multiple different methods that are done to kill the fetus and then remove the parts from the mother's womb. But yeah, I digress nonetheless. But something along those lines. Obviously, I would have expounded more on the argumentation and how violinist argument is not exactly equivalent to pregnancy. But I could go on longer, I could have gone on longer, but I'm just going to leave it there for right now. There was one point in which Gabe had brought about the point, like I kept on appealing to nature, and by the way, I know that appealing to nature can sometimes be fallacious, but I don't know if it's completely fallacious in regards of talking about pregnancy and, aborting a pregnancy, and saying how using that as a crutch to basically say it's not exactly equivalent to the violinist. But in response to the whole naturality of pregnancy, he said in response, well, what about a surrogacy? He used some other term, but I asked, do you mean a surrogate pregnancy? And he said, yeah, basically. Of when that a woman does not have sex to get pregnant, but I don't know what the exact process is, but basically take in the sperm via injection, or in vitro, I think was the term that he used, basically to inject the sperm instead of taking it through traditional sexual means, through directly from the man's dick. Again, a little bit raunchy there, but nonetheless, is saying that that's not exactly natural. And I said, okay, touche. He was more talking about what if somebody was to force a surrogacy on a woman, not necessarily voluntarily taking in a surrogacy. What if a woman was to be forced a surrogacy pregnancy on them, not necessarily raped, but all the same they were like knocked out, unconscious, and then they were pregnant via surrogacy or whatever else? Then I said, okay, touche, yeah, you might have a bit of an argument there. But nonetheless, how much often does that happen? I would gander a guess that it would be almost zero, in fact. Boy, I have a lot of editing to do because I'm just all over the place with my points. There are 2 more things that I wanted to address. First one was there was somebody in the live chat on his end on Twitch that was mentioning the percentages of how many abortions take place at what certain stages in pregnancy, generally speaking, in America. And he kept on saying that is like 65% that happened before the 13-week period. I can't remember what exactly he said. And I was claiming that he was wrong, and he said 90% before 20 weeks. I'm getting the numbers wrong. I don't remember exactly what it is. I'm just rough quoting him. But basically, I got into looking back on the percentages of what he was claiming about the 65% and the 90% in regards of how many abortions took place at what stage. And I looked back at my own numbers from the CDC, and they did kind of add up to what his percentages were that he was presenting. The guy from Gabe's fan base anyways. So I do not know why I keep on forgetting the total percentages from the CDC, my own source that I provided in my One Strike Force editorial talking about abortion. But really, regardless of what the percentages are actually, even if it's like 30 or 10% of abortions happen at this certain stage that I don't want it to be legally allowed, even if it's a smaller percentage, that does not dissolve my passion against those particular abortions and against abortion in general nonetheless. And also there was like the point like opening up with the racism part of that debate. And basically I had made the claim of saying that essentially that part of the reasoning as to why that possibly black people like on average make less income than white people is because they participate less in manufacturing. And it was a bit of an assumption on my part. I made myself look like an ass for not having the numbers on hand with me. But I just earlier today gone reading the stats from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, linked down in the description box below, breaking down of what percentage each racial group participates in what sector of the economy. And looking at manufacturing specifically overall, because obviously there are many different subsets of manufacturing that one could look at in that chart. But looking at overall manufacturing, it turns out that I was right nonetheless in my assumption. Even though I was taking a high risk in making that assumption and I guess ultimately still making myself look like an ass, but I was still right, but not as right as I thought I was. Because looking at it, white people are overrepresented by about 2 percentage points in manufacturing, and black people are underrepresented by 2 percentage points within manufacturing. And yeah, just looking at the overrepresentation or underrepresentation, that would contribute to the average within each racial group as far as how much income that they go for. And I think that that is more because of factors outside of just pure systemic racism. That was the point that I was trying to make there, and that's the point that I am going to make right here, reiterate here right now. And so I just really want to go back on that claim because I got kind of jumped on a little bit about that. And also, I guess it's fair for me to mention the gender spectrum portion of that debate. Whatever person wants to think about how good or bad that I did on that portion of the debate, I don't really care that much. I mean, we were at least not speaking in regards of legality, law, or whatever. Outside of that, I really don't care about the gender spectrum issue overall. It was just a little interesting thing that I thought we'd go on about briefly, and we did for about 35 minutes, something like that. And I guess I do have to find a more solid criteria for why that I think that gender binary is legitimate and gender spectrum is not. But yeah, in regards of whether or not gender is binary spectrum, I don't care, just as long as people are not going to enact laws either way on the circumstance. That's all I care about in regards to that. But anyway, yes, I'm going to say again, if you haven't seen that debate, go ahead and watch it. I'll have it linked down below, actually, and it's my most recent upload and so forth. And tell me what you think yourself as far as how good or bad I did within the debate. It was still a good debate overall. And hope to have another debate sometime with a leftist in general. Perhaps GabeisGunk sometime, but I don't know of how soon that would be because there's other people that I want to talk to as well within the near future as opposed to Gabe. But nonetheless, I'd like to thank him for giving me the invite to debate. And I am Zach, the Dark Conservatarian. That's all I have to say about this review. Just get some things off my chest. See y'all later. God bless.